Hello and welcome to Analog Slop, where two music industry lifers revisit their youth via the enemy and melody maker of the 90s. We'll be exploring artists we discovered as wide-eyed teenagers, only to disown as sneering 20-somethings. Now, unshackled from hipster baggage, we dive deep into the pre-digital world to look back on a time when the 80s were a dirty word. My name is Adam Bushell. I've been a music supervisor for 20 years.
And my name is Graham Best. I've worked in music publishing and music tech for 20 years. Each week, one of us will read the NME, the other will read the Melody Maker, and we'll pick out the most interesting stories and discuss them. This week, it's the 21st of January, 1995. REM returns to the road. An 80s revival makes Gen X recoil in horror. Menswear's complicated legacy is considered. Trip-hop is not yet a dirty word. And Bad Religion sell out for nothing. This week I will be reciting from the Melody Maker of 21st of January 1995. The cover is one I have been really looking forward to digging into. The cover is The Future Sound of Bristol, featuring Portishead, Massive Attack, and Tricky. It is trailed as a 7-page trip-hop special because it's January 1995 and there has been no revolt against the word trip-hop.
Brilliant.
We also have a big banner along the top of the cover with the declaration that the REM World Tour has kicked off in Perth. So for a bit of context, as the date would imply, it is 1995. It is the Britpop apex year. And yet, we are 7 months away from the Blur versus Oasis chart battle between Country House and Roll With It. 7 whole months. We are 8 months away from the release of Blur's The Great Escape album. And that means we are 9 months away from the release of Oasis's What's the Story Morning Glory album.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from a dry list of dates, what that means is that, I think for Melody Maker in particular, it's still heavily aligned with what we have described previously as its US interests. So even in a post-Nirvana world, one of the lead live reviews is Everett True, seeing a group I had never heard of called Free Kitten play London. Free Kitten is a supergroup made up of Kim Gordon.
Oh, yeah.
Someone from Pavement.
The Boredom's guy, yeah.
Yeah, the Boredom's guy, and someone from Pussy Galore. And as part of that US interest, that means that REM's first full live shows in 5 years get a really big entire page news piece on page 3.
Remind me the album in 95 they're touring?
It's the one that you have described yourself as an apologist for. It's Monster.
That's what I thought, but I just didn't want to go. I was like, when was New Adventures? No, they were coming pretty thick and fast, REM albums in the 90s, as I recall.
Yeah, I think I mentioned when we last spoke about REM, one of the podcasts I follow has just spent over 2 years doing a album by album deep dive on their entire career. And the pace of albums between the debut right the way up to Up is absolutely insane.
So on the cover of this week's NME, because I told read the NME, there is a piece on Belly, and Tanya Donnelly is on the cover. Belly are on the verge of releasing their second album, King, which is a kind of understated follow-up to Star, which was unexpectedly a big hit for them and 4AD, their label. Belly are like a US alternative rock group. Tanya Donnelly is the front woman. She used to be in Throwing Muses.
Am I right in saying Throwing Muses were also a 4AD band?
Yes, they were. And one of the interesting things that's happened since I've bought literally hundreds of old copies of the Enemy and Melody Maker from the 90s is that Belly are on the cover like all the time. I've got like 10 copies of, they're like where they're just Tanya Donnelly is on the cover repeatedly.
With all that coverage, how did we only know 2 people who liked them at the time?
Yeah, no, I thought they were just this band that was around, but considering all the talk of trip hop and Britpop, do you know what I mean? Like Belly on the front cover, it's like a strange start to the year. And again, they just feels out of place. I did actually listen to King this week. I'd never listened to it before. They mention in the interview with, this is like the first tangent of many, I'm sure. They mentioned in the interview with Tanya Donnelly that King is got a less immediate album than Star.
Ooh, scathing.
Yeah, its charms reveal themselves slowly. Which is another way of saying it's kind of boring, but like it is solid. It's like if this if this came out now, it's kind of like Soccer Mummy Spotify core play. I would be like, oh, this is kind of cool retro band that's kind of slightly unambitious 90s sound alike kind of vibe. I would actually like to hear it again. I probably will go back to it.
Is this front person one of the members of Boy Genius? That sort of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I like those bands, and I think if you kind of had it on, like, I think its charms would reveal themselves if you listen to it over and over again. But on first listen, I was a bit like, this is boring. But yeah, maybe that's because we've got this crazy sprint to like talk about these things every week.
Yeah, it's an interesting question to consider whether if you were stuck on the train back from Guildford to listen to this at home, knowing that it was going to be at least a week until you owned another CD, whether you'd be putting the work in.
I think I would. Okay, yeah, that's the enemy. So you were going to talk about some news pieces this week.
Yeah, so I've got two. One is titled REM Play First Concert in Perth in over 5 years. The other one, which we'll come to afterwards, is titled Two Pricks and a Cunt on the Road.
Nice.
So it's quite an interesting blend of factual reporting, gossip column, and live review. I think it's interesting for reasons we will get into shortly that the Melody Maker have made this a full-page article. Like, it's literally the first thing you see when you open the magazine. The gist of it is that REM commence their first tour in over 5 years. It is a enormous tour. It is in support of their Monster album. So at this point, it is named the Monster Tour.
Have you seen the film about this tour?
I've seen clips of it. I've never watched the whole thing.
So REM, they're one of those bands that they just have a great amount of documentaries about them, made by them, commissioned by them, tour films. There's a really great documentary called REM by MTV, and there's a 5 DVD box set that goes with that, which is it's about their relationship between REM, who start roughly around the time that MTV do, and how they kind of grew up together. It's excellent. You should hunt it down.
I am aware of the sheer amount of video content, and I think it's really interesting that there are a lot of alt rock bands that cross over that kind of trade on their art school roots. But Michael Stipe's interest in visual and video art seems to be one of the few examples of someone actually persevering with that stuff as their group continues world domination.
He also seems to like being the subject of a documentary.
Yes.
Not in a like he's sort of vain or something, although I'm sure he has an ego, but like, he does it very well. Do you know what I mean? He's kind of aware of that he's having a kind of don't look back moment, when they happen.
Yeah, I think Michael Stipe's relationship with a camera, video or still, is very, very interesting. Because I think it's that duality of having an ego, but not being entirely convinced that that is a positive thing.
He's certainly not shy about putting himself into his art. He never seems to be holding back.
One of the things I've noticed in studying press comments from Michael Stipe as kind of supporting research for this is that his tone when talking to the press oscillates wildly between kind of understatement and almost aggressive overstatement of like his artistic worth. That's really, really interesting. So just to rattle off some bullets about this, like I said, it's the start of an enormous world tour, which is planned to go on into 1996. There is a reference from, I think, either Peter Buck or Mike Mills, the guitarist and bassist respectively, where they are very upfront about the fact that they are not simply doing an enormous world tour. They're also committed to writing and recording new material on the tour, which is exactly what happens. They record the follow-up to Monster, New Adventures in Hi-Fi on this tour. Interestingly, and I see some similarities with how a lot of acts structure their UK tours. The opening 2 nights are in Perth in Australia. This is almost a rhetorical question, so sure am I of the answer, but have you ever been to Perth?
No.
Are you aware of where Perth is on a map?
Very, very far away from where I am currently.
Well, it's also very, very far away from pretty much fucking anywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the southwestern tip of Australia. Like it is miles from anything else in Australia. So I don't know. Maybe I am overemphasizing the effects of globalization and digital culture,
Hmm.
but I find it really interesting to make your return to the live arena in some way so isolated, circa 1995.
I don't know. I have to look at the dates from where they started to where they were. I'm sure there was some logic there.
I mean, the parallel I see with a lot of acts doing UK tours is that a lot of times the UK gets lumped in with, well, Ireland gets lumped in with the UK. And what that normally translates as is that everyone's opening nights are in Dublin.
Yeah, okay.
And Dublin gets the first night nerves and the teething problems. Anyway, so we're in Perth. We are miles from anything. And to be blunt, the first night is a total bust. The article labels the opening night in Perth as an ignominious debut.
Yeah.
And highlights a low energy performance compounded by terrible sound and what is euphemistically described as opening night nerves. The writer feels that the underperformance on the first night is further compounded by the set list.
Okay.
His first issue is that they play every single track from Monster.
Oof.
Which is a choice.
Yeah.
And he complains that the rest of the set is made up predominantly of nearly all of Out of Time and Automatic for the People, two of the biggest rock albums of all time, neither of which were toured on release. His hypothesis is that the lack of energy and muted crowd response is because they're playing all the new stuff and not the REM classics. It is baffling to me that a writer would complain about REM playing too much, Losing My Religion.
Have you seen the Late Show clip of them playing Half a World Away?
No, I haven't, but I love that song, so I'm instantly intrigued.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I think that anybody listening to this who's a similar age to us will know exactly what I'm about to say. There's like a famous TV special called No Nirvana, which the Late Show puts out, which is a compilation of US alternative rock bands. It's the first time I ever saw or heard Rage Against the Machine was on that. It completely blew my mind. And it's like Pearl Jam, Sonic Youth, Rage Against the Machine. Anyway, and randomly REM in the middle of this doing Half a World Away. And even as a young teenager, I was like, that is absolutely amazing. It's like an incredible performance by all of them. That is, you almost can't take your eyes off. Yeah, that's a load of hyperbole, but I stand by it. It's fantastic. Go watch it.
I'm going to track that down because, like I said, I love that song and I am very much down for a transcendental live performance of it. So the first night is something of a low energy write-off filled with these newfangled songs like Man on the Moon. This is in stark contrast to the second night, which the writer and apparently the attending audience are totally enraptured by. Massively raised energy from the band, and crucially for our hits-fearing singer, a more varied set list that draws on their earlier material from their IRS, the independent label they were signed to before Warner's years. Interestingly, we mentioned about how would this translate to the live arena. On this tour, the band are up to a six-piece with a bunch of supporting musicians. And this is where the report kind of takes a turn for the slightly tabloidy. It mentions that the group arrive in Perth with a 36-strong entourage, and Peter Buck gets married the day before the first show, and the band play the wedding. It aligns with my views on REM at that point in time, that this is sort of all the trappings of mainstream rock megastars.
Yeah.
You can kind of feel the barely restrained backlash in the writer's account starting to bubble. But the knives are out. This is one of the tentpole US alternative bands of the last decade and a half. When you take that kind of sense of the Emperor has less clothes than we thought and combine it with this early stage Britpop hype, you get a sense of where the zeitgeist is moving.
There's 3 pieces in this week's NME which discuss the 80s at varying lengths. And I just want to talk briefly, as briefly as I can, about how the 80s was viewed in the 90s. The first piece I want to talk about is on page 7. It's right at the end of the news section. Do you remember Nag Nag Nag? Do you remember that? It's like the kind of
Yeah.
yeah, okay. This was, and it would always have like a different title. And this week it says the column that's independently minded. And the writer this week is lamenting the current state of indie music. He's asking essentially, where has the unprofessional sense of experimentation gone? He's saying we are now left with, quote, corporate jingles for teenagers. He's asking for a return to the early 80s, an indie music scene made up of bands from small DIY, independently run labels. He says current indie bands are readily susceptible to the allure of the corporate checkbook. His mind's about to be blown. Fast forward 15 years into the future.
I was going to say, this guy's going to love the fertility.
Yeah, exactly. So literally the next page is a 3-page takedown of the 80s, right? Which basically, it's like 80 shit things about the 80s, which is...
What a bizarre concept for a piece.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so it's titled Oi Okie. No, I'm not going to do the Harry Enfield thing. I don't want to, but like that's what it's in reference to. Again, it's kind of it's a 3-page listicle. It's written by Johnny Cigarettes, so it's very funny.
Is the title a reference to the fact that like the Human League have just released a new album?
That's exactly right. I'm building up to that. So as I say, written by Johnny Cigarettes, so it's really funny, but it's just so interesting the way the 80s used to be viewed. I was slightly confused, aside from the Human League thing. It didn't really seem like enough, but not remembering every single microgenre that happened in the kind of second half of 1994. Clearly, there'd been some kind of, there's going to be a synth pop revival article, and they grouped together like a small group of bands, which...
Is this a Romo thing?
No, it's not. This is not
Okay.
Romo. This is pre-Romo. So we're not there yet. This is more like out and out. There's going to be a synth pop revival. And one of the artists they mentioned writes into the letters page and said, please do not lump us in with these other bands. They're shit. Somebody else complains about it. And weirdly, it also comes up in an interview they did with Jeremy Clarkson, where they're just like, they're both agreeing that the music of the 80s was completely shit. Anyway, it's a fascinating timepiece. Because believe it or not, there was a time when the 80s were thought of as a decade that produced nothing of value. Not a bit shit, not naff, not didn't they wear funny clothes and have funny haircuts. Literally nothing from that decade was good. Do you remember this?
Yeah, that is literally like the pop culture sort of understanding we grew up with.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And it's interesting because obviously we're talking about Gen Xers, Johnny Cigarettes, Gen Xer, and his ilk, who made up the writing staff of the NME, and the melody maker, would talk frequently about how shit the 80s were. Though it was just this throwaway joke of like, fucking let's all just forget about that. Anyone who kind of went anywhere near it was just like immediately like, oh my God, how could you possibly? Funnily enough, Paul Morley is thrown under the bus viciously, not once, not twice, but 3 times in the article. Paul Morley, despite famously referencing people like Baudelaire and Brecht, this is a quote, it says, wrote books on ZTT and compiled compilation albums, has yet to be prosecuted for the term new pop. What were we thinking?
I love a good palace coup.
Yeah, exactly. It also just made me think how the 90s were a decade that were just supremely pleased with themselves. Do you know what I mean? And like everything they produced.
That feels like an epitaph for Gen X overall.
Anyway, there's a massive picture of Phil Oakey on page 8 because the Human League have a new album out called Octopus. It's the lead review in long play titled Doing It for the Squids. It gets a 7 out of 10. The album is praised for not aping the styles of the day. Basically, it's not like we made a 90s dance album, which they did the last time round and they said was terrible. It does sound a bit... I listened to it. I'd never heard it before. It's got Tell Me When on it. You remember that track?
Yeah, When Will I See You Again?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it sounds a bit Stock Aitken and Waterman, but kind of adult contemporary version of that. Kind of polite dance pop with a heavy emphasis on pop. It does sound very 90s, despite what they say.
Man, it never crossed my mind that Tell Me When came out in 1995. In my head, that must have been on the album after Dare, circa 1987.
Yeah, exactly. But if you listen to it with that in mind, it makes just complete sense. Like it is, it is inescapably 90s. Nobody else would have made the choices that they make, but the quality of the sound is that kind of thin 90s pop. Do you know what I mean?
Production and mixing techniques, certainly in the first half of the 90s, get far too much of a free pass for how awful they sound.
With all this in mind, obviously the 80s revival doesn't really take hold until the very late 90s, early aughts. I would say arguably it has never gone away. And the 80s supplanted the 60s as the kind of decade from which people just endlessly take stuff from.
Just to interject briefly,
Yeah, please.
I remember how brutal the whiplash was when things like Le Rhythm Digitalis started coming through
Yeah.
and drawing on 80s aesthetics and drawing on 80s sounds.
Yeah.
And the cultural whiplash of what I've just been brought up to understand that this was all shit. What do you mean it's good? Was intense.
He was almost treated a bit like a novelty act, as I remember. They were like, we're going to tolerate this because you're clearly there's something slightly tongue in cheek about this. And DJ Punk Rock, I remember that had a kind of similar thing. I think it was a bit more like that was aping more kind of like mid 80s Def Jam and electro. So again, it was coming at it from a different place that was somehow allowed. Looking at this article now, as in the 3-page listicle, is really funny. It just made me think about myself in that it's taken me years to get my head around the fact that things I liked in the 90s might be worth revisiting. Like most music that I listened to from the 90s, like as an adult, was stuff that I discovered later on in life and not what I listened to at the time.
Can I also add that something that I associate very closely with you is you being an early adopter of the 80s aesthetic revival in a near militant way?
Yeah, I got really, really into bands like Talk Talk and New Order, but also The Smiths in a less cool way. And what I thought was really interesting, based on our own experiences, the article is written by someone looking back at their shameful adolescence, much as we did in the aughts when all 90s indie music was verboten for being retrogressive, uninspired, self-important, and adolescent. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the stench of melodrama hung over it.
Yeah, and in the aughts, the music of the 80s had started to seem like a wonderland of musical variety, both mainstream and alternative. And the 90s, in comparison, seemed just very drab. And the music press desperate to grab onto things that were third-rate copies of things that happened in the 60s and 70s, all delivered via a kind of more professional spin on first wave indie, which is, going back to the initial nag column. I just remember us and our fellow Zillennials that grew up on this stuff just endlessly making fun of this period in a kind of contrast to our progressive young adults' tastes that included a massive chunk of 80s bands and whatever, all the kind of hipster touchstones, of the, looking at the 80s from the vantage point of being like someone who's like in the mid 20s, it was in the kind of middles, it was like, it just seems so genre rich. Like so many things are happening for the first time. It's like post punk into first wave indie, house music. It's like Second Summer of Love. It's all kind of stuff that is happening kind of for the first time.
I tell you what else is happening for the first time, which I think is something we've overlooked so far. The 80s is the first decade which gets reappraised when we have access to free file sharing. So the previous process of reappraising a decade, where you have to hunt the records down, you have to carefully choose how to manage your resources to explore different avenues.
Yeah,
that doesn't exist here. It's like, yeah, I'll take the Gang of Four discography. Why not?
Absolutely. And if you compare that to the genres that we kind of grew up with in the 90s, you're just like, well, this is just a copy of everything that's just happened. And I know that's not true. I don't really feel like that anymore. But I was just like, if someone had asked me as recently as like 5 years ago, what's the worst decade for music? I'd be like 90s. Like 90s music is shit. Like I would say, you could point to like, warp classics, like boom bap hip hop stuff. And then you'd just be like, anything made by people with guitars was fucking awful because it was all just like a copy of some great shit that happened in the 80s. I no longer believe that, but that was like my kind of Johnny Cigarettes looking back moment.
That's a really interesting, I appreciate your position's evolved, but it's really interesting that would be your stock position, because I think, not to like smoke up my own ass, but I feel like I've been very consistent over the last decade that if people ask me what is the worst time for music, the noughties are exactly what comes to mind.
Which, interestingly enough, right now are going through a massive revival.
Yeah, and I find that hard. We are back in reappraising the 80s territory for me. I'm just like, fucking hell, some of this is hard going. And in general, guitar music from this decade is like fucking right off.
Well, because of the job I had at the time, I had to listen to it. We talk a lot about landfill indie. I was like being buried by that in that landfill like daily. It was my job to stay on top of this stuff. So I feel like I look back on it a bit more fondly because I was listening at the time, I think, to something like at least 16 to 20 albums per week that were made contemporaneously, like from front to back. Just because I kind of had to. I was obviously a lot of skipping and fast forwarding, but I had a long commute, and listening to music is just a big part of my job. So so obviously stuff from that time has kind of stuck around a bit more for me because I was working it, if you know what I mean. The music, not my ass. You had a second news story.
Yeah, I did have a second news story, made all the more pertinent by Johnny Cigarettes and his hatchet job on the 80s. This short piece is titled Two Pricks and a Cunt on the Road.
Mm-hmm.
And it is about Prince.
Nice.
But he's not called Prince at this point. Basically, the artist formerly known as Prince has vowed to stay on the road and not record until Warner Brothers either releases or returns the master rights to his Gold Experience album, which Warner Brothers have refused to release. So the artist formerly known as Prince has announced a series of UK shows in March. These are all the kind of the high end of arena gigs in the UK. So we're talking Wembley Arena, Manchester GMX. I don't know what that's called now, or if it still exists. Venues of that ilk. Like, you are a big deal if you are playing those venues.
Absolutely. I bet they were awesome gigs.
Well, yeah, almost without a doubt. And they were awesome gigs, perhaps, because they featured, and I quote, the focal point of the show, the endorphin machine, which is said to resemble the male and female genitalia.
Okay, nice.
The melody maker followed that up with a line break and the words, "Oh dear," full stop.
This is where the two pricks and the cunt come from.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, even by melody maker standards, that's like confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're at the start of Prince's wilderness years here. He's got 3 more UK top 40 singles in him after this week.
Yeah, I would argue his wilderness years never stopped after Diamonds and Pearls.
I would agree with you, except for one counter, which we'll get into.
Okay.
There is a track that I have no recollection of whatsoever called I Hate You that charts at number 20 in September of 95.
Tell me, how is you spelt in that time?
It's spelt just the letter U, and I is spelt EYE, but I don't know if that means it was simply an illustration of an eye on the sleeve.
Correct. Classic Prince song title.
Standard Prince stuff. The title track from Gold, just called Gold, gets to number 10 in December, and that is his last top 10 UK record. Something called Dinner with Dolores goes to 36 in August 96, and that's your lot. But that is the end of Prince charting in the UK top 40, which sadly means that 2006's absolutely incredible Black Sweat only got to number 43, which is a travesty, because that record is incredible and the last great Prince song.
I heard it. I remember that again. I was buried in an indie landfill when that came out.
I remember it coming out when we were really deep in our sort of futuristic R&B obsession,
Okay.
like Neptune's, Timberland, all of that sort of stuff.
Okay. What year is that? Sorry.
2006.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it leaked in 2005. Like it felt like it was around a long time.
Okay.
But yeah, I love that record because it literally sounds like one of those Neptune's drum tracks. And Prince just going like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. I need to listen to that again. That sounds great. I think that's probably something I listened to once to see if, just to check it out, and then never heard it ever again, which seems really stupid.
It's got the same sort of drum programming that grinding like Clips has, but then it's got like some like really like wig out synth squiggling over the top, and Prince being exceedingly lascivious.
I think, as you say, I was listening to the Cassie album on repeat at the time.
Yeah, fair.
Ryan Leslie was probably, interestingly more at the time.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Leslie and what was that guy's name who produced Hush by LL Cool J? I think it was Aquarius 7 or something.
What a great record that is.
Before we try and out hipster each other on early 21st century R&B.
I just 2006, that was what I was listening to over and over and over again. I'm sure you were as well. There was also a Next Selection mixtape as well which I think 90% of the artists on never ever appeared ever again. But it was also pretty good.
So I talked before about that kind of cultural whiplash of being informed that the 80s had value after all and having to recalibrate my understanding of the decade. It feels like Prince has been deified for our entire adult lives.
Yeah.
Including pre-death.
Yeah.
I saw Prince at his O2 residency in 2007. Obviously, it was incredible. 2007 is the same year Prince plays the Super Bowl. And completely kind of reinserts himself into the popular imagination. To be blunt, that continues to this day. After his death, even though his recorded output is still, for the rest of his life, is still, not approaching the level he reached in the 80s and early 90s. He is at that point just a kind of an international treasure, like a cultural figurehead. It's Prince.
He has a confusing discography. Would you agree with that? He's one of those people where it's like, as you could say, a really big Prince fan, make me a Prince mixtape or playlist, and it'd be like 150 tracks on there, and you'd be like, I haven't heard of half of these releases.
If I met someone who had no exposure to Prince and they said, what album should I start with? I'd be a bit lost.
Exactly.
I'd say his best work is some parts of Parade and some parts of All Around the World and some parts of Sign of the Times. And Purple Rain's really good.
I was really into Prince as a 10-year-old. Not because I'm the coolest motherfucker on the planet, but because
not because you're in hot shit.
Yeah, exactly. Because I read comic books, and like the Batman movie coming out in 1989 was like the biggest thing that ever happened in my life. And I bought everything I possibly could that was to do with it, including the soundtrack, not the score. I also bought that, but like the soundtrack that's all his songs, which I listened to endlessly. And then got totally weirdly, the next Prince album I bought was Love Sexy, which if you remember the cover of that is
I remember.
Is a very odd thing for like, just because it was cheap, it was like a cheap tape, and I was like, oh, I like Prince. And then the Christmas that like Diamonds and Pearls came out, like I got that for Christmas, like the tape of that. It was so it's just like that's how all over the place he was.
I have 3 eras of Prince. There's the omnipresent Purple Rain 80s singles bit, probably up to Bat Dance, where I'm like, I'm aware of it, but I am insufficiently developed to have any like critical engagement with it.
Yeah.
Other than this is cool. Then there is the triple punch of Get Off, Diamonds and Pearls, and Peach as singles.
Amazing.
Get Off is probably still my favorite Prince song. I fucking love that song.
It's fantastic. Also, Money Don't Matter Tonight is on that.
Oh shit! I totally forgot about that one. What a run of 4 singles off the same album.
Absolutely. Have you got the box set?
No, that's the one Prince box set I don't have yet.
Okay, so there was an SDE, like they do the deals around the world thing. It was like 40 quid in like Amazon France for like a week, and I was like, yes, please. And I got that. It's really nice to have. It's really got a really cool book. and it's great to listen to an album that you haven't heard since you were a child. It's really interesting to kind of listen to it as an adult. The unreleased stuff is super interesting. The live stuff's good. I don't think the album itself was aged particularly well.
It's definitely got that 90s sound.
Yeah, it's like his hip hop record, basically, which I didn't know until I read that in the liner notes. Like, I had no idea that's what he was going for. Like, yeah, I really am disappointed that we'll never see that documentary.
Yeah, well, I'm really disappointed that there's at least a dozen documentaries we will never see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, give me a hagiography. I actually don't mind. Just give me like a front to back series where they're just like, right, we're going to talk about every album, and we'll just take you through it.
Yeah, yeah, it's like fine. Let the estate have sign off. I would still appreciate that level of access.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Give me something to organise my thoughts on this man.
As I was saying, so there's this huge critical reevaluation for the early 21st century that continues to his death, that continues today. Prince is amongst the stars, as in like just huge cultural figureheads. And all of that is why it is so incredibly jarring to see such an aggressive, even by Melody Maker standards, headline attached to a piece of coverage of it.
Yeah, sorry, I just realised we've been talking for half an hour about this and we haven't mentioned the article, except for the first bit.
It's because the article is about 400 words.
Okay, all right, yeah.
This year he has slave painted on his face for all his public appearances. The coverage in the press, the music press, but also the wider coverage in the British press, tabloid and broadsheet, has a general reaction of "get over it, you're rich and famous."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is the tone of coverage I recall from this time, and the general kind of, I think, particularly UK angle on it. Yeah, in conclusion, this article feels like, and the headline specifically is just a really interesting example of what you were talking about with the Enemy Johnny Cigarettes piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the sacred cows of the 80s are being slaughtered. This piece articulates that with remarkable economy of language.
Well, so you mentioned earlier we're peak Britpop. The Times, they are a Britpop. This week's On, which is a section I'm always fascinated by, where Enemy showcased new and exciting bands. It's the Enemy Brat Bus tour, headlining, by the way, is Spiritualized.
Really? They must be promoting Pure Phase.
They're promoting Pure Phase, which I'd never heard before. I listened to this week. What an incredible record.
For many years, it's been my favorite album of all time. Not the best album I've ever heard, but my favorite album. This year at the Barbican in March, I went to see them play it in full.
Okay.
It was one of the most disappointing, boring gigs I've ever been to.
That it's funny because I was walking home. I was literally just walking to my front door, and that song came on about good dope, good time, whatever that is, and those horns stuff out. I bet Graham loves these fucking horns.
Yes, I do.
I also thought like Jason Pierce, if he ever hears the song "Heroin" by Velvet Underground, that's going to be embarrassing. Fuck, I just clearly ripped this off for like my whole career.
Why did no one tell me? How on earth did this happen?
Anyway, we're not going to talk about Spiritualized because this week in On, it's a murderer's row of Britpop bands. There's Menswear, the Blue Tones, Gene, Supergrass, and Rub Ultra, who are a funk metal band. I will be completely ignoring them because they do not fit in with the point I want to make about this.
I feel like this sequence is going to be testing our don't be toxic and negative ethos to its limits.
Well, get ready, because there's one band in particular I'd like to focus on. You know where I'm going. Of the 5 bands, the largest picture, and they get the full page, is Menswear.
Of course.
So, Graham, are you ready for the Menswear discussion?
Yes. I was going to try and quote Daydreamer, but I can't actually remember the words. So, yeah, let's go.
Do you know what? Before we start, I just want to say 95 is the year we finished school, secondary school, and moved to college. And we had an end like leavers disco, right? And one of my memories from that night is Daydreamer being played and everyone kind of dancing and it being like a thing. So, it's not like that was like, some John Hughes esque film set during the Britpop years. Like that actually was our life. Do you know what I mean? That really happened. They were around.
Mhm.
I know they've been the perennial butt of many a Britpop joke, but they also were a band that people liked and were, on the radio and on TV and all this stuff. Anyway, they are photographs on Westminster Bridge with Big Ben behind them. Lead singer Johnny Dean is wearing a suit.
Of course.
The Enemy points out they're at the centre of a trend-crazed cyclone. They were signed after playing only a handful of gigs. It says here 3. I don't know whether that's true or not. It seems very improbable, but maybe it's true. They are also described as being at the vanguard of a sharp-cut youthquake. Yeah.
I don't feel we were part of that youthquake.
Well, yeah, let me continue. So, this is, how I love to do.
I was referring more to the cut of our clothing than anything else.
Definitely, we were not part of that particular youthquake.
Can you imagine if we met each other in 1995 and we were wearing fitted suits at sixth form?
No, I can't. Like every other teenager, we wore jeans and t-shirt like every single day. So you know how I love to do these bands by the numbers. Here we go. This is from Menswear by the numbers. They formed in 1994. The average age was 19 when this article was written.
That's actually older than I remember them being.
Okay, well, in February of this year, they will be on the cover of the Melody Maker despite being unsigned. In fact, they're on the cover of the Melody Maker, I think 4 times over the year. I think the 4th cover it says, "Is the hype justified?" You want to scream at it, go, "It's your fucking hype. Stop putting them on the cover if you're hand wringing about this."
Alternative front page. Were we wrong?
Yeah, exactly. In March, they make their TV debut on Top of the Pops. With I'll Manage Somehow. In April, they released that single On Laurel, which was a Britpop set up for Britpop, a subsidiary of London Records, which is, of course, a subsidiary of Universal Music Group. In October, they released their debut album, Nuisance. In 1997, they are dropped by London Records. 1998, their second album was released in Japan only by Polydor, the same year the band break up. So they released 5 singles from Nuisance, the debut album. I'll Manage Somehow goes to number 49. Daydreamer goes to 14. Stardust goes to 16. Sleeping In goes to 24. Being Brave goes to 10. They have a non-album single called We Love You, which comes out in 1996, which is the Britpopiest Britpop song that ever Britpopped. It's fucking crazy. You have to listen to that.
I remember that song getting absolutely butchered in the Enemy singles review that week.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what the problem is with them? I think, listening back, and I really don't mean to be mean, I think that they are not helped by quite weak production, but Johnny Dean has quite a limp voice. Like, you could switch in I listened to the first album, which I hadn't listened to since I was a teenager. It's equal parts Blur of the period, like Park Life, Modern Life is Rubbish, a bit of Elastica.
I have a pressing question, or rather, a pressing sense check. Is the chorus of We Love You something like, and we love you, so come on, so come on, so come on?
So the concept for the song seems to basically be that even though you don't like us, we love you.
I'm terrified at the prospect of a non-album Menswear singles chorus still being buried in my memory.
Yeah, so it's, and we love you, so come on, come on, come on, and we love you, so come on, come on, come on.
Great.
Love us or hate us, we love you, they sing. This is their Mr. Writer. So the second album I'd never heard because it wasn't unlistenable to, back in the day. So the first album, because your pressing question interrupted this, but the first album is very Blur. It sounds like Blur. There's no getting around it. For sprinklings of Elastica and early Beatles. The second album is later Beatles, but with more of a kind of West Coast 60s American sound.
So it's like the Cribs before the Cribs era thing?
No, it's more like kind of Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Okay.
But not really, like, because they don't really have that in them. And also, what's really weird is some of the tracks, you could take his vocals out and put Liam Gallagher's vocals in, and you'd
Hmm.
be like, "What's this Oasis demo I've not heard before?" It's really odd. It's quite rockish. Similarly to the first album, you could take his vocals out and stick Damon Albarn's vocals in. It's like an interesting thought experiment to walk around listening to those records, just imagining that those people were singing it. I think because his voice, it's just not to my taste. It sounds quite weak, and he's underserved by this quite bland production, I think. So what's interesting is obviously like the band that gets the least after Rub Ultra, who we're not going to mention because they don't fit my point.
I feel like they probably supported the Manics at some point.
They're like a funk metal band with kind of hip hop overtones. I did not listen to Rub Ultra, but maybe one day. So Supergrass are like at the bottom of this article. It's like Menswear are the headline, then it's like the next band they're excited about are the Blue Tones. They get half a page, and then it's Gene, and then it's like Rub Ultra and Supergrass get like a paragraph.
So a quick couple of thoughts from my side on that.
Mm-hmm.
One is that I thought Gene were way more established than this.
Gene have released 3 singles at this point.
The other thing is not to try and do armchair industry analysis, but I can see a rationale for Supergrass being so far down because at this point it's kind of the second time round for them. Like it's the Jennifers, which I think was the original name for Supergrass, that were a development deal and got dropped. And Supergrass is a kind of repackaged Jennifers with some new songs. So I can understand a degree of skepticism from NME tastemakers.
For me, I Should Coco, which is Supergrass's debut album, is like the best Britpop album. Britpop, it's been said many times, it's not really a genre. It's like a collection of bands, and some have certain signs and signifiers which really tie them to that term. And Supergrass definitely had that at that time. You're really talking about a very small amount of records in terms of the kind of Englishness.
We talked before about US alternative rock and your higher tolerance for it.
Yeah.
What I am taking from your love for the Supergrass debut is that you also have a far higher tolerance for English musical mannerisms than me.
So Nuisance by Menswear, I think we can agree, is seen as something like the nadir of Britpop. And as a band, I would say they're kind of defined by those signs and signifiers, and they're unable to escape from under them, despite the change of direction. They're basically seen as the all style and no substance.
I was thinking about this earlier when you first brought up Menswear, and I was thinking about the reality of being 18, 19 in a band that you have formed because you like the idea of being part of a scene
Yeah.
and playing live and being noticed in that scene.
Yeah.
And then being hurled into a debut album, accompanying tours. You get to the end of that and someone says, right, second album. And you're like, what? Writing songs is really hard.
I think when someone says, right, first album, they would have been like, fuck. To kind of go around in a circle to the beginning, this is not 1985. Do you know what I mean? They're not going to get played on John Peel and go, wow, job done. Do you know what I mean? This is like, guys, get ready because, you're going to tour Europe, then you're going to tour America, and we expect top 10, top 5 singles.
Well, that's the other thing. It's interesting that those chart placings for the singles are not especially high, not by the standards that would come and be expected in this era.
Okay, so this is kind of where I'm going with this. I mean, their age and their meteoric rise make it seem kind of a bit unfair, like all the stick they got. Nuisance is made by a band that arrived perfectly formed for the time, right? It's, as I say, the Britpopiest Britpop band that ever Britpop. And they were heavily associated with Blur, right? Which I'm wondering kind of slightly doomed them. Because one of them played trumpet, like for Blur, that was part of their kind of live band.
I did not know that.
And they were kind of like Camden scenesters that kind of hung out with them, especially Graham Coxon, which is weird because he's the most ardent critic of this period of Blur. When I was listening to their debut album, I just kept thinking, what would he think when they played this to him? Considering they formed in 1994, right? The template for them at the time is Park Life, yeah? I mean, when did Blur win all those Brits? Is it this year, right? It can't have been 94.
Yeah, it's spring 95 where Blur clean up off the back of Park Life.
Yeah, so that's their template for being a band, basically. Like, this is kind of what we want to do. They're like a punkier version of Blur. They're not very punky, but What I mean by that is the kind of short, sharp, like kind of it's the Elastica element I was talking about. They're like a young indie pop band making their debut record. They're not like Blur on the third go around. Do you know what I mean? Having really fucking seen some shit. Like they've, you know, do you know what I mean? Like kind of endless tours of America, massive disappointing in sales wise at least, like second album.
Yeah.
And it just seems like a zeitgeist cash grab, even though what the hell would you expect a young band to make at this time? They could have done with more time in the oven, but then they would have completely missed Britpop. If their career didn't run through this year and wasn't like the peak, I don't know where else they would have gone.
I was gonna push back on that, but when I think about it, the fact that they are in the slipstream of Parklife era Blur, I think kind of even if like it's not the most progressive, innovative era for music, the fact is that Parklife came out in like '94, and it gets its flowers in the first quarter of 1995, and then things move on.
Yeah. Well, Blur don't.
Menswear can have, yeah, I mean, like relatively speaking, Menswear can have more time in the oven, but What's the Story Morning Glory is still going to release this year.
Yeah, I mean they say we're in a full on like mod revival. Like this is part of the article, which again is incredibly nebulous. Like I don't really know who they're referring to aside from Menswear.
Yeah, when I think of mod adjacent music, I think of a 60s equivalent to Big Beat. Basically, white kids trying to recreate Black American music.
Exactly, which is not this.
When I think of mod, I think of like quite a lot of aggression and like angular and quite rhythmic.
Mm-hmm.
None of those descriptions make me think of Menswear.
They are angular, that's for sure.
Their jawlines and suits, perhaps.
I mean, in conclusion, I listened to both albums and adjacent singles.
I feel listening to the second Menswear album is a heroic endeavor and a demonstration of the grit we apply to this podcast.
This is part of my sickness, is that I will be the first one to go running headlong into Seahorse's B-sides.
Coming to the Melody Makers cover feature, while you and the enemy have offered us a Britpop murderers gallery, I, on the other hand, am playing the proto-hipster angle with the cool new sound of Bristol.
Let's hear it.
There is a 7-page feature, including 3 double-page spreads on a trio of artists who would go on to have, I think it's fair to say, very different careers. So let's kick off with the first one. The one I'm least familiar with, and that is Tricky. So ironically, for the first entry in this trip hop trinity, I have the least to contribute here for a really simple reason. And that's that until this week, I had never listened to Max in Key, the album that this piece trails and that releases the following month.
So can I ask a stupid question that's I'm not having a dig here? Is it Max in Key or is it Max in Quay? Because I always thought it was to do with Finley. I thought Finley Quay was like dimly related to Tricky.
I knew about him being related to Tricky, but I had never joined the dots there. And yes, on the basis of how Finley Quay pronounces his name, I think you are right, because this album is supposed to be named after Tricky's mum, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that would make it Max in Quay.
Max in Quay. Yeah, Max in Quay.
Max in Quay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. We have affirmed the pronunciation of Max in Quay. So Max in Quay comes out in February 1995. It's been trailed by singles going back to 1993 at this point. Like the Tricky machine has been slow to warm.
The back page of the NME is a full page advert for the single Overcome.
Exactly. The piece is actually an interview that's conducted on the set of the video shoot for Overcome.
Okay.
That NME mention reminds me that Max in Quay goes on to be NME's album of 1995.
Okay. All right.
Which I remember vividly because it was the first album of the year chart I ever saw.
Okay.
In that year's NME, and I remember being baffled at what was at number 1.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get into my thin ice bit now.
Okay.
Part of why I was not previously familiar with this album, part of why I have a big blind spot on Tricky's discography in general, is twofold. The first part of it is that a lot of this music went over my head at the time of release. The second and knottier part is the reputation Tricky had within the music business when I started working in it.
So can I say something a bit safer as well? Is that trip hop was like synth pop for Johnny Cigarettes for us. We were too young for trip hop. It sounded like dinner party music to us as kids. We just didn't get it. It's like that's not what young, exciting music is supposed to sound like. And we spent a good chunk of like the following decades going on about how shit trip hop was.
I have a slightly different perspective, but we got a long way to go before I get there.
Okay, all right.
We align on the idea of this not being our music, but yeah, I take a quite different route to get to that conclusion.
Okay.
To be blunt, this was not our music. It felt made for an older audience. So, point all being, I'd had limited exposure to Tricky's music with one notable exception, and that is the cover of Public Enemy's Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos, that is track 3 on this album. If you haven't heard this cover version, it is one of those big radical reworkings of the original. The original is with the best will in the world to Public Enemy's seminal "It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back" album. It sounds like a wasp trapped in a Coke can. The cover on Maxine Clay is a kind of slightly glossy sort of pop metal version with this really nonchalant British female kind of half speaking, half singing vocal over the top. It's great. Moving on to the piece itself, it's, I think, what I would describe as standard introductory music press article from this era. And it is very introductory, which is interesting because the aforementioned 2 years of single releases leading up to this point.
Yeah.
Tricky and Martina Topley-Bird are interviewed together at a video shoot in Canberra Sands. And in contrast to maybe the more contemporary persona of Tricky, the vibe is this kind of amiable West Country bemusement at the grind of a music video shoot.
Okay.
There's a real lack of cynicism in this.
Yeah.
Which is kind of hard to square with what we know now.
Yeah.
I mean, even despite this kind of like overwhelming, like amiable kind of vibe, and the fact that the writer is not stingy with the praise he is lavishing on a pre-release copy of Max and K. There's this sort of kind of slightly sort of seasick tension bubbling under the surface. There's a really odd navigation of gender at the start of the piece.
Yeah.
Tricky's talking about how he regards himself as feminine and how his family's background is unusual and how part of that kind of family's sort of traditions was to send the men in the family to attend boxing classes, and how he lasted like 10 minutes in a class before deciding this was absolutely not his thing at all. There's also an extended section where he talks about how he recognizes how easily influenced he is by the company he keeps and how he has to monitor the habits of the people he surrounds himself with constantly. Like he makes like explicit reference to people doing coke and people doing smack, amongst other substances. Like he specifically calls those drugs out. It's a disquieting kind of flag about what's coming further down the road.
Yeah, yeah.
The album itself, like I said, I've only spent a week with it, so in-depth analysis is not going to be happening here, but I have really enjoyed my time with it. Way more than I expected. It is much, much more of a... It's not a conventional hip-hop album, but there's a very clear Wu-Tang influence on this album. You could easily imagine like listening to like Enter the Wu-Tang and Only Built for Cuban Links and sticking this on in the same listening session.
Yeah, I know the song from that record which has the Isaac Hayes sample in it, the same one that Portishead used. That's where it starts, and it's same as you. I don't know what I was thinking. I never ever have listened to it, which seems like a bizarre blind spot.
The mention of the Portishead shared sample, which is something that comes up across all of the groups that are covered in this article. The fact that apparently there are only 4 records in Bristol and everyone has to take their samples from
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
But yeah, the Portishead article, which directly follows it, Again, it's quite a light touch article, but there are some quirks synonymous with the era that like they're just too glaring to not call out. The first thing is that the Portishead article is also the cover image. Now, I mean, it's easy to throw rocks at 90s music press photography, but I think there's some truly, truly awful headshots of Beth Gibbons looking staggeringly uncomfortable.
I think generally the photography in the enemy is pretty good, and generally the photography in the Melody Maker is not great. I think they do that stupid fucking thing, which they, it's like where they make them dress up and like pull stupid faces. It's just so weird. It's just like everything looks like the Beatles' Butcher's cover. Do you know what I mean? It's just these bizarre set pieces that, just don't never really work and just like make them look like idiots and make you wonder why you bought that magazine.
Yeah, the Beth Gibbons headshot, according to my note, they are like something out of a More magazine photo story. They are like these insanely contrived expressions of stress and bewilderment.
Okay, wow.
And yeah, she's clearly like not comfortable like working with a photographer
Yeah.
in that way.
Actually, this cover image of Tanya Donnelly on the cover of the Enemy this week that I'm looking at with it has the wonderful pun "Bloom, shake the womb, belly flower again," and it's like, would you believe it's Tanya Donnelly's head poking over a load of sunflowers?
I remember that image. That's like iconic as a stretch, but that is a very recognizable image from 90s indie culture.
Yeah. Well, people just don't do this anymore. They're just like leaning against the wall or something. It's just they don't need a gimmick. Like it's bizarre. Anyway.
Maybe it's more that the photographers have lost all leverage in the equation.
Do you remember every Christmas they'd be dressed, there'd be bands like dressed up as elves or Father Christmas or something on the cover. It's so weird.
We're going to get onto a story soon where it's like this just would not happen today.
Okay, let's go.
Aside from these atrocious photos, there's a very obvious elephant in the room, which is that despite Beth Gibbons being the cover star and the main visual representation of the band, she does not contribute a word to a double page interview. So a quick little bit of context on Portishead and where they're at this point and their relationship with the Melody Maker. Dummy was Melody Maker's 1994 album of the year, Dummy being Portishead's debut album. And the album and the group's profile are kind of slow burn successes. So as the journalist is with the group, Glory Box is confirmed as being at number 13 in the midweek charts. Jeff Barrow is on hand for a reaction. His reaction to his publicist is to ask, "I don't have to go on Top of the Pops, do I? I hate that show." And that's our introduction to Jeff Barrow. He is the primary talker here, as the kind of the lead producer and programmer of Portishead. He's also supported a little by Adrian Utley, who is Jeff Barrow's kind of co-producer and also guitarist.
The other guy in Portishead.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll come back to him. Jeff Barrow's stance throughout this interview, and indeed in any exposure I've ever had to his views and opinions, reminds me a bit of our conversation recently about Steve Albini's curmudgeon status and our evolving attitudes towards that.
Yeah.
Jeff Barrow is what used to be championed, maybe not the right word, used to be categorized as a purist hip hop head.
Yeah.
Or what would now, of course, be described as gatekeeping. And I mean, full credit to Jeff Barrow, he is nothing if not consistent. The tone of his comments and the complaints he makes, I hate pop music, I hate everything about the music business apart from the writing and recording of music, I don't want to be famous, I value my notion of authenticity above all.
What a loser.
He is still saying exactly the same shit.
Yeah.
But he has not changed his message.
Well, they make fantastic records, indisputable. You could put any of those on and be like, well, this is clearly great.
Well, this is something that I think is really interesting. Like, Portishead is so of its time, and yet history has been incredibly kind to their output.
Yeah, I would. It's really damning them with faint praise to say they're like the best trip hop group.
For all of his like old man yelling at cloud persona, Jeff Barrow is like one of those guys who's just been utterly committed to doing things on his terms. And the payoff for that is that they have maintained this kind of combined credibility and admittedly niche, but still a commercial appeal that hardly any of their peers have. And by peers, I mean the kind of 90s alternative scene rather than trip hop specifically.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, as a side note, I think it's really interesting that we're at a point in the music press where, the kind of like youth is being put on a pedestal to a greater or lesser degree.
See Menswear.
Menswear, like Ash, like, kind of young is good.
You say Supergrass, also very young. Jennifer's was super young. Supergrass, I know it's Gaz Coombs, Danny Goffey, and Mickey, what's his name? The third, the not the bass player, I guess, in Supergrass. Mick Quinn. He was like in his late 20s when they were breaking.
Okay.
But the other two were very young.
That's interesting. I did not realize the bass player had so many years on the other two. So in all of that cult and fetishization of youth in the music press at this time, it's really interesting how Portishead get a total free pass.
Mm-hmm.
In January 95, Jeff Barrow is 24. Fair enough. Beth Gibbons is 30. And Adrian Utley is a frankly criminal 37 about to turn 38. Like Adrian, at this point in time, Adrian Utley has already spent the 80s like as like a top line jazz guitarist, session musician for like prominent jazz names when they toured the UK.
I mean, there's nothing that would have sated the enemy or Melody Maker more than that description.
What? He played the Stan Getz trio. Tell me more. But yeah, again with Dummy and the singles around it, coming back to this in 2025, I was aware of the singles at the time. Certainly more aware and more engaged than I was with anything that Tricky was releasing.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like alien music, and I found it kind of awkward and unknowable, but really interesting at the same time.
I don't want to sound like I'm some kind of like super genius as a teenager, but I really got the soundtrack thing. Mm-hmm. Like that was kind of hooked me in. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like I kind of see what they're doing there.
And that was my biggest takeaway from this. I did not land on the soundtrack thing inevitably, but what I could read very easily is the influences, the contemporary influences that are going into it, and that New York boom bap element. And the most obvious one is again like the RZA's production style from Wu-Tang Clan. Those are two very contemporary, very like transparent influences on what Jeff Barrow is doing with these albums. It was a question that I tossed around in my head as, does trip hop happen without the Wu-Tang Clan?
Yeah, wow.
The Wu-Tang aesthetic is so transferable to a city like Bristol and most of the UK, to be honest. Like for all like the kind of the wonders of G-Funk, like G-Funk is not inspiring any UK genres.
No, you're right. Yeah, it sounds so foreign. Yeah, it's like they have the same records in their collection.
Yeah, exactly. Like Wu-Tang end up using that same Isaac Hayes sample at some point.
Yeah, I Can't Go to Sleep or whatever. Is that what it is?
Yes. Yeah, that's the one. All right. So the final article in this trinity is probably the most successful, the most prominent, and the most active to this day group, and that is Massive Attack.
Yeah.
A spoiler up front: this piece would not happen today. This piece would not even make it to the sub-editor's desk today. This piece would be strangled at conception by a publicist drawing on every single threat in their toolkit.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so this week, as part of the deal with the devil I made with you, where you do production and I handle social media, I've been drawn back to Instagram and studying the craft of social media.
Yeah.
One of the first posts by an account I'm not following that I got fed by Instagram was a big statement by Massive Attack complaining about the Co-op Live Arena in Manchester ambushing them with Barclays as a new title sponsor a couple of days before their gig there this week.
Okay.
Outcome of this, the group decided to go ahead with the gig at the insistence that Co-op Live Arena remove all Barclays branding from the venue for their show, and on any Co-op Live Arena website content that Massive Attack are featured on, like all Barclays branding is removed. And yeah, they then went into a detailed breakdown about precisely why Barclays are evil, which, like fair play to them, like it was forensic in its detail. And that is consistent, I think, that whole post and the kind of the infrastructure around it, that's consistent with what I think is the contemporary view of massive attack. Principled, eternally vigilant to appropriation and injustice, and maybe more than a little sanctimonious. This is wild speculation, but it can sometimes feel like Massive Attack are paying off an eternal moral debt for dropping the attack from their name for the purpose of radio play during the Gulf War. So that's where we're at with the Massive Attack brand in 2025. This double-page spread in support of the impending release of Protection as a single includes a photo of the photographer attempting to whip one of the band members on a hotel bed with their belt, and a big pull quote blown up that reads, "You want to see him suck my dick and lick my ass. Is this some kind of childhood thing?" And that is attributed to the somber, enigmatic 3D.
Sorry, what is the concept behind the piece?
Be patient, all will be revealed.
This is really not where I thought this was going. I would never have guessed this in a million years.
So the piece opens in a green room, like post-gig scene with Massive Attack, and they are debating the gender of a venue staffer at the Hacienda, and it's reported in the kind of transphobic language that would make J.K. Rowling uncomfortable. Like it's like, holy fuck, like I can't believe people used to print this stuff. But like by extension, like groups of predominantly men in their 20s on tour, I can believe they talk like that. So the scene moves onwards back to the group's hotel, where like we're at the after party now, and 3D is staggeringly wasted and spots a group of teenage girls looking over at the band from a distance. He is quoted as declaring to everyone there that he is going to, quote, fuck all of them, until it turns out that one of the girls is the daughter of one of the managers, their managers, Massive Attack's managers, and the group is her friends. And he's kind of disavowed of the idea.
Okay, thank God.
The piece then moves to the after party, which is up in the hotel rooms. At this point, 3D is even more wasted, and the group has been reduced to 3D, the writer, a photographer, a press officer from Virgin, who I assume lost their job after this article was printed. And someone who's described as the music editor from a prominent London weekly listings magazine. So if that's not Time Out, then what the hell is it? So there's a bit of intervention from the photographer, whipping people with the belt and ordering different kind of proposed photo ideas, which is where the box out quote comes
got
from.
It. Wow.
So after this interaction with the photographer, the piece then makes really clear that 3D fucks the listings editor back in his room.
Nice.
It literally describes her dragging 3D back to his room and the door closing behind them, like cut paragraph.
Yeah. Wow.
We're 2/3 through the piece now.
Okay.
Like the vast majority of this double page spread is like basically like 3D getting wasted and embarrassing himself in front of a journalist.
Like it's like Hammer of the Gods for Massive Attack. It's like really bizarre. Yeah, Massive Attack is I think it's like perennial kind of people that did graphic design at university in the mid-90s. This is what they listened to whilst they were working on their coursework. This is not what I have in mind.
Yeah, so we've done like over 2/3 of the piece at this point. So there's like a 2-paragraph sprint through like what they're actually there to report on.
Yeah,
which is that it's their debut live tour. Virgin did not take them seriously when they said they wanted to tour, and each show they're doing acts as a kind of mini indoor festival. Each show has a second room, like with a dub sound system with Mad Professor playing. Each show has these really big video and art installations. Basically, this is like the end of 94, early 1995, and Massive Attack are touring exactly how they tour now. They're just doing it at venues the size of the Hacienda and the Astoria.
Okay, yeah.
This kind of comes full circle to that Co-op Live post. When I think of those Massive Attack live shows from the limited exposure I've had to them, they do not appear to be a relaxing or joyous experience. They are bleak and oppressive and grinding.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me that a group that makes such oppressive music can have enough of a following that they can play a venue like Co-op Live over 25 years after they last released an album that was well received and a commercial success.
Not to mention for our generation that wasn't really listening, they were like the kind of them and Portishead were like poster charts for this kind of boring dinner party music, which if you listen to even 5 seconds of it, you'd be like, oh, this is not what this is at all. Like, but everyone heard Protection and would like have made their mind up that that's what it was.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this comes back to like our perceptions of this music maybe at the time. So you were saying earlier how you had that kind of like, this is boring, this is dinner party music.
Yeah.
I had a slightly different take on this. A Massive Attack, in common with these other acts, but Massive Attack I feel like are the apex of this. They're what I think of as cool older sister music.
Okay, yeah.
I do not have an older sister, but still, it's music from the 90s, which is based in musical influences that predate my involvement in pop culture.
Okay, yeah.
Like, something like Unfinished Sympathy. Like, you know, there's like elements of like house, there's elements of like soul and disco in there.
Yeah.
All things that I did not have in my musical palette.
Yeah.
In like the early mid 90s. And that's the point. It's a lot of this music is drawing on influences that I just didn't understand in my early teens.
Yeah.
Basically, it wasn't heavy rock or alternative rock. So I was like, I had no reference point for this at all.
Yeah. I don't mean this in some kind of sensationalist way. I'd obviously heard Unfinished Sympathy many times as a child because it was like a pop hit. I put them in the same box as like M People or like Gabrielle or something. Do you know what I mean? That's what I thought it was. Like this just kind of tasteful older people music. I didn't understand it. I thought exciting young music was the complete opposite of this.
Yeah, I don't think I was as down on it as that.
I don't mean down on it. I don't even mean that as like an insult. I just mean like almost adult contemporary, 90s adult contemporary. That's kind of how I thought of it.
I think that was definitely the perspective that by the time we get into like the second half of 95 and into 96, that was definitely the perspective we were being fed by the likes of Enemy and Melody Maker.
Absolutely. It doesn't seem like a band that is going to be on the cover of the Enemy 4 times in a year like Menswear. Melody Maker, sorry.
I would speculate that something that Massive Attack, whether consciously or not, were very good at is picking collaborators that would help them get attention from places like Melody Maker and Enemy. Like Tracy Thorn from Everything But the Girl, Liz Fraser from Cocteau Twins. That is a kind of foothold for the more indie inclined press to understand. I mean, the last few years, I've kind of felt like, oh, I want to explore Massive Attack's discography a bit more and see if I can get my head around this. And the biggest barrier to that has been 3D's vocals.
Yeah.
Once you compare his vocals with Tony Mortimer on Deep by 17, you're not going to unhear that.
Deep by E17 is an amazing record.
It's the record loaded by Primal Scream could have been. Seriously, man. But Deep is basically like a kind of popped up loaded instrumental with 3D MCing over the top.
I'm so tired of playing with this bow and arrow. Gonna give my heart away, leave it to the other girls to play.
Okay, so from trip hop to punk rock, we're going to go to an article hilariously titled "Sony Seems to Be the Hardest Word," about Bad Religion, who are promoting their major label debut, Stranger Than Fiction, a record that I was really, really into at this time. I listened to it a lot.
This is the one with 21st Century Digital Boy as a lead single, right?
Correct. I think they released 4 singles from this. We kind of get into that. It had sold to Sony a disappointing 250,000 copies.
Do better.
Yeah, exactly. So, from 2025 perspective, that's quite funny. But Bad Religion are a long-running LA hardcore band formed in the early 80s. They are coming off the back of 15 years of DIY ethics, sort of loud, fast, political, proudly independent. They're known for being anti-corporate, anti-commercial, and anti-compromise. However, In January of this year, we find them signed to Sony, a major label. To be fair, I would never have heard this record if they weren't signed to Sony, and the publishing, the promotional machinery around it had not put them in front of me.
Am I right in thinking that prior to this, they've been releasing via Epitaph Records, which was their own label?
Well, thank you. So, guitarist and co-founder Brett Gurewitz has just quit the band. Gurewitz owns Epitaph Records. It's a long time indie label. This is one of those things where it's like those kind of boots on the ground reporting thing. It's like the angle of the article is this inescapable thing where whilst Bad Religion's album, which is very good, Stranger Than Fiction, is seen as underperforming by their label. Meanwhile, their ex-guitarist's label Epitaph is going through the fucking roof because they signed The Offspring, and The Offspring released Smash the previous year, which apparently is the best-selling indie album of all time.
I had never thought to join the dots between those different events, but that is hilarious.
Exactly. Ironically, Gurewitz had left Bad Religion for selling out. So he's basically like,
you guys sold out. I'm going to release an Offspring album.
I know. Well, make of that what you will, but basically he's like, we don't need the backing of a major label to be huge. And that's my thing. And, you know, just to kind of prove this, I'm going to release the best-selling indie album of all time by a punk band.
What a fuck you.
Although they poke some holes in that. They're like, no, that's not what happened. He was totally cool with it. You know, he's just saying this to sell more records. I don't think he needs to do that, but whatever. I'm being quite poo-pooing about Bad Religion. I think they're a good band. I really like Greg Graffin's vocals. Sometimes I just want that kind of like propulsive drumming, super earnest, like lyrics that kind of tell you how to live your life, if you know what I mean, or just like
Yeah. They're instructive, but also his vocal tone. Yeah, it's got the sort of like SoCal nasal thing, but it doesn't veer into like the irritating kid brother.
That's exactly right.
Like the kind of like late 90s like punk bands.
He's like the older brother.
Yeah, yes, that's a really good word for it.
Yeah, it's like this, don't judge me, I'm going to live the way I want to live. It is literally like, it's like listening to a wellness podcast or something, to be honest. It's like, stay true to yourself and don't sell out. Do you know what I mean? Even though they've just sold out to Sony, whatever. So, what is punk in 1995? Basically, it's like, if you recall, feel free to jump in here and name anything I've mentioned or poke holes in this. But to me, punk bands are kind of replacing grunge as the big American exports.
Yes, 100%.
So I'm just going to reel off the one. This is off the top of my head. So The Offspring obviously released Smash 94. Green Day, Dookie 94. Rancid and Out Come the Wolves is 1995. No Effects, another Epitaph band, released Punk in Drublic in 94 and Heavy Petting Zoo in 96. Two massive albums.
Really interesting point to make about No Effects is that they take that Epitaph model and run with it, because I think after those albums, No Effects set up Fat Records, and then that just becomes their label. Like they become self-releasing.
Yeah, and also in parallel, kind of to Bad Religion, Descendants release Everything Sucks in 1996, which is another kind of, I kind of wrote like a head above water album from an 80s American punk band.
I was going to say they're veterans at that point, aren't they?
Exactly. Well, it's one guy, isn't it? And like it's not like it was some huge smash, but it was around, you know, and it seems to kind of fit with this. Am I missing anyone? Were there any other big crossover bands? I know it's like No Effects is almost different to all these other acts, and Descendants obviously, because they're all major label bands.
I think Rancid are one of the most interesting.
They were on Maverick, weren't they?
Well, the UK press, like whether it was the weeklies or whether it was like the harder stuff like Kerrang, everyone hated Rancid in the UK because it's like, this is such an obvious like Xerox of the Clash. Why would we need this? We have the Clash records. At least for like Green Day, No Effects, and those sort of bands, there's that SoCal DNA. so it sounds like something at least different to English ears.
All the albums I just mentioned, except No Effects, I owned and enjoyed, because it was like contemporary popular music. I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't like I'm kind of building up to it. It wasn't a lifestyle thing like it perhaps would have been like 10 years prior. This was just what was popular, and kind of disposable, but also really infectious, and I found kind of irresistible.
It's another interesting kind of divergence in our tastes, I think, because I was never very into the US stuff, but I lapped up the vastly less successful but hugely cherished by those American bands UK equivalents.
Yeah, big fan of Snuff.
Snuff, Leatherface, those are the sort of two big ones for me. I went through a phase of being absolutely obsessed with the Clash.
I've never liked the Clash. I don't like them. I just nothing's ever broken through for me. I'm sure at some point it will in my life. So Garowitz is seen as defending the original hardcore values, whereas Greg Graffin, the vocalist, I got a quote from him here. It says 80% of our crowd nowadays are complete fucking idiots. So I don't know. He's not enjoying the major label spoils. They kind of talk about it's the punk purity panic, as I put, and like their discomfort with this kind of MTV mainstream. Have you seen their videos around this time?
I only really remember. Is Incomplete off his album as well? Yeah. I remember Incomplete in 21st Century.
Yeah, rewatch the video. They're very funny, like kind of mid-90s timepieces, Lawnmower Man-esque kind of graphics and stuff. It's almost like the headline is Bad Religion are being outpaced by the scene they helped build. And it's like, even though punk is replacing grunge, Bad Religion are missing the wave. I don't know if that's fair. I mean, I don't know what they would have had to do to like capitalize on this. I feel like in their own way, they did.
I'm really fascinated. This might be a niche view, but I'm really fascinated by how Epitaph pulled off Smash as a commercial success. Because in a pre-digital age, working out how to get nationwide distribution for your independent CD as a small independent, like in the US, I do not understand how that works.
Yeah, I mean, to avoid all of that, Come Out and Play just completely blew up. Right.
Yeah, I guess the 3-letter answer to that question is MTV.
Yeah, maybe. But anyway, I mean, my kind of highfalutin sign off was that this is the moment where punk becomes a genre, not a position, which I think you could poke many holes in. I think NoFX, you know what I mean, stuck to the kind of punk values, and were very successful. I believe continue to be very successful, but I don't think either The Offspring or Green Day gave two shits about, do you know what I mean? Those things really.
I mean, the following decade would suggest you're right.
And, you know, by the time we get to Alien Ant Farm, Blink-182, Lit, I mean, this is really in the rearview mirror. Like, you know, any idea that, you know, there's even such a thing as selling out. You're just like, well, what is this all for, if not for putting our music in front of as many people as possible?
I mean, I feel like that is maybe a reflection of your entry point. So if you are Bad Religion, if you are The Offspring, Green Day, and Rancid, even like you don't come up via MTV. You come up probably from like hearing like random records on the radio. And then going off and exploring those and like finding those like secondhand copies of Clash albums or whatever. Whereas if you are Alien Ant Farm or artists of that era, then your introduction is probably seeing Come Out and Play on MTV.
Yeah, maybe.
Like your frame of reference is different, you know? Like there's no concept of like purity or like a punk ethos. If you're sitting there like kind of on the sofa and there's like a 1-2-3 punch of like Green Day, Offspring, Rancid on MTV.
Yeah, I think Rancid are probably the most principled of those, as I recall. They were kind of purists. They definitely did not play the game that Offspring and Green Day played to their varying degrees. Yeah. And again, I don't mean that in a disingenuous way, but the Offspring doubled down on writing pop hits. Green Day kind of progressed into more of a album band with kind of, you know, I would say grown-up singles and stadium-ready stuff.
I maybe this is stretching the point, but I feel like Green Day, they look towards the Clash as a career model in terms of we have done punk and now we have transcended punk.
Yeah, okay.
And we
Yeah.
are something kind of like more expansive and like more befitting kind of the rock world. The same way like London Calling is not a punk album.
Yeah.
Like by the time Green Day get to like American Idiot style concept albums, like they've left that idea of like trad punk behind.
Yeah, they're like, we're like U2 in punk clothing.
Well, I can see my teenage father standing straight on a distant corner in the shadow of tentacle towers by the red light of America. I imagine how his mother felt when she heard that her husband was dying.
That's it for Analog Slop this week. Join us next Wednesday, where we find Rocket from the Crypt at their commercial peak. Graham accuses me of being a super furry animals enabler. DJ Shadow amazes the enemy. And Paul Weller bores the melody maker.
In the meantime, you can find us on the socials and most of the usual places. That's Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all under the Analog Slop name. That's all one word and spelt ANALOGUESLOP. However, if you prefer your podcasts to involve static pictures, we are also on YouTube. That channel is youtube.com/ANALOGUE slop. And finally, if you want to send us an email, we're reachable predictably on analogslop@gmail.com.